Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my top 32 ranked wide receivers for fantasy football in 2021. Now, in this video, we're mostly going to be focusing on wide receivers 25 through 32, because I've already made a video talking about wide receivers 1 through 12, as well as 13 through 24, that you can check out on my channel. I'm still going to be listing those guys off in this video and talking about them ever so slightly, but if you want the full, complete breakdown of those wide receivers, make sure you check out those videos as well. And if you guys do end up enjoying this video at any point, you end up having a great time, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football League. So without further ado, let's get into it. So my top 10 ranked wide receivers in order are Davante Adams of the Green Bay Packers, followed by Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Justin Jefferson, Michael Thomas, Keenan Allen, and DK Metcalf. I think the guy that I have most ranked differently compared to other fantasy football experts or analysts is probably DK Metcalf. A lot of people are super high on DK Metcalf going into the 2021 season, and I am too. I have him ranked as a top 10 wide receiver, but I am very worried about the fact that I think that the Seattle Seahawks may try to run the ball a lot more in 2021. At the end of last season, Pete Carroll's talking about how he wants to establish the run some more as he chomps his gum aggressively when he's talking to the media. I'm sure that Pete Carroll loves to run the ball, except for when he's on the 1-yard line of the Super Bowl. So I think it is entirely possible that Chris Carson is getting a lot of touches in 2021. And I think with the fact that Tyler Lockett kind of had a bunch of bad games last year, if he is more resilient this season and shows up a lot better, that I think DK Metcalf might end up falling outside of the top 8 where most people have him ranked. Another guy that I have ranked kind of pretty high that I know a lot of people are debating over is Michael Thomas inside of the top 8. I think that he returns to form, whether it's Taysom Hill or famous Jameis E.W. Winston. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think Jameis is going to be the guy in 2021, and I am very, very confident that Jameis can return to be actually better than he was in the past after that LASIK eye surgery, so he's going to actually be able to see much better. And I think we see a new version of famous Jameis Winston. So now on to 11 through numero 20. At number 11, we have Allen Robinson of the Chi-Town Bears. At 12, we have Robert Woods. 13, Terry McLaurin. 14, Julio Jones. 15, Amari Cooper. 16, Chris Godwin, 17, Mike Evans, 18, Deontay Johnson, 19, Cooper Kupp, and 20, wiki, DJ Moore. Obviously, after the Julio Jones trade, it is definitely entirely possible that he does finish as a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football in 2021. I loved Julio in Atlanta. I thought that with him healthy, he would return to form and actually still be pretty solid. But now, obviously, in Tennessee, he should still be getting enough receiving opportunity as the number 2 wide receiver in that offense. I still like Julio Jones a ton. Another player to talk about real quick, Deontay Johnson. A lot of people are either in or out on Deontay Johnson. There's basically no in between. People are either in favor of Deontay Johnson or think this guy is going to bust completely, like fucking, I don't even know how bad he's going to bust. People seem to believe that Deontay Johnson is just not going to be the guy. Last year, he had a whole lot of drops, and people are thinking that this is over for Deontay Johnson. He's probably not going to get too many chances. If he can't figure it out, he's going to be done. But what I saw last year, while he did have struggles dropping the ball, was that he was a target monster in this Pittsburgh offense. I have him ranked lower than I initially did, strictly because of the fact that I do believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to try to run the ball a little bit more, which will obviously hurt all of the wide receiver core in Pittsburgh. Now on to wide receivers 21 through 24, and then again, obviously, we're going to go into the straight-up breakdown of wide receivers 25 through 32. At 21, we have wide receiver CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys, 22, Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos, 23, Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings, and 24, Kenny Golladay of the New York Football Giants. Courtland Sutton last year got hurt, but I do believe that we will see what we saw in 2020, or 2019, I should say, with him and the Denver Broncos. I honestly could not give less of a fuck who the quarterback is in Denver, whether it's Drew Lock or whether it is going to end up being Teddy Bridgewater. Now, if it's Aaron Rodgers, obviously, Courtland Sutton shoots directly to the moon, because then you are very, very confident in the quarterback play there in Denver. But again, that's just wishing on a star. I do believe that Courtland Sutton is a very talented NFL wide receiver, and last year, obviously, there wasn't much to see because he got got hurt so early on in the season. Now, on to the meat and the potatoes of the videos, wide receiver 25 through 32. At number 25, we have Tyler Lockett, wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Tyler Lockett is a guy that I basically will not be drafting because most people have him ranked much higher than I do, ahead of spot 25. In 16 games last year, Tyler Lockett finished as the wide receiver 8 in PPR, 9.5 PPR, as well as number 11 in standard, averaging 16.6 PPR points per game, 13.5 half PPR points per game, and 10.3 standard points per game, meaning from points per game perspective, Tyler Lockett was wide receiver 12 in PPR, 12.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 16 in standard. Now, there's definitely a big difference between his points per game finish versus his actual finish on the season by a couple of spots. It is because he played in all 16 games, and because Tyler Lockett is about as inconsistent as it gets. He is, in my opinion, the most inconsistent wide receiver in the NFL. If you take a look at his game log, you will see that this guy is just up and down. He basically has fucking mood swings all season long. Week 1, he's wide receiver 20, then he's wide receiver 11, then he's wide receiver number 1, followed by wide receiver 76, 50, then number 1 again, 54, 62, 31, 11, 71, 42, 42, 65, 61, and 5. Does that sound like something you want on your team? A player that is super duper inconsistent. Now, if Tyler Lockett was to break the inconsistency and play very good every single week, then you're obviously going to be very happy having drafted Tyler Lockett at his current ADP at pick 49.3 based upon current underdog ADP. I actually think that in best ball, Tyler Lockett is certainly worth that draft selection because he's going to have maybe 4 or 5 games where this guy puts your team on his back and carries you in best ball. But in a regular season draft, in a redraft league, you're going to have to determine every single week when you want to start Tyler Lockett, and he's not having these boom games up against bad defenses necessarily. He'll have a shitty game up against a defense that could not guard me if I was the wide receiver, but then he plays up against an elite defense, and this guy drops his pants to his legs and puts his dick over the DB's shoulder and basically just asserts his dominance over him. That is exactly what Tyler Lockett did to the defenses, even though it wasn't even meant to happen. It was so hard to figure out every single week, and that is exactly why every single week last season, I was so unsure of what you wanted to do with Tyler Lockett because there was the upside that he has the boom week and wins you your league, wins you your week, I should say. But then there's other weeks where the guy shits the bed and completely ruins your week and you lose because of him. So he's very up and down. Again, if he somehow fixes this, then he will be much better. Last year, having 132 targets, 11th most at the wide receiver position for 100 receptions, 5th most at wide receiver, over 1,000 receiving yards, 1,054. 15th highest at wide receiver, and 10 total touchdowns, 7th highest at the wide receiver position. So I understand why people like Tyler Lockett. I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to be a very solid offense, but again, with the worries of them trying to run the ball more and with the worries of his inconsistencies, frankly, that is why he's outside of the top 25 and basically makes him undraftable because of how high he is going to be going in your fantasy drafts. At number 26, we have Brandon Ayouk, wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers, underdog ADP 61.4. Now, the San Francisco 49ers last year went through straight up turmoil. Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy Guap, Jimmy Pornstar gets hurt early on in the season. 9-inch Nick Mullins is playing. They have all these quarterbacks playing, and even with that happening, Brandon Ayouk was still able to put up a very solid rookie season after he got drafted in the first round last year out of Arizona State. Now, Brandon Ayouk was not a guy that I had the greatest expectations of going into the 2021 season or the 2020 NFL season prior to the Deebo Samuel injury. I was kind of confused as to why they drafted Brandon Ayouk because I thought that him and Deebo Samuel played a very similar style of football. Brandon Ayouk ends up getting elevated into the starting role because of this injury, and it really helps him out. But regardless of the injuries around him, with the quarterback position, with George Kittle, with Deebo Samuel, even when Deebo Samuel was in the lineup, Brandon Ayouk was still fine. So I have a lot of confidence this year that Brandon Ayouk should be able to have another plus season. Now, the confusion with Brandon Ayouk obviously comes yet again with the quarterback position. I've said frankly like 7,000 times, have zero clue who the starting quarterback is going to be for how long of the 49ers. I don't know if Jimmy G is going to get the whole season, if they're going to pull Jimmy G after he plays like shit, or if Jimmy G is just going to end up getting hurt like he always does, and then Trey Lance ends up starting at the quarterback position. Now, really, regardless of what happens, I think his outlook would be similar, but it could completely hit the haywire or go completely haywire if Trey Lance just sucks. Now, again, I'm not saying he's going to suck for his career, but where he played in college, it makes him a huge unknown coming out of North Dakota State if he can do it at the NFL level. Maybe he struggles in the first year, and this immensely murders Brandon Aiyuk's value. So that's why I have him as wide receiver number 26. Last year, playing in 12 games, finished as wide receiver 35 in PPR, 33.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 33 in standard, averaging 15.4 PPR points per game, 12.9 half PPR points per game, and 10.4 standard points per game. Meaning, from points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 18 in PPR, 17.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 14 in standard. So overall, Brandon Aiyuk was very, very good despite the things going against him, like I've kind of reiterated 7,000 times in this video. He is very young, and while the 49ers offense does like to run the ball, I can still see a lot of use out of Brandon Aiyuk, who had 97 targets last year for 60 receptions, 748 receiving yards, and 7 total touchdowns. So again, you just have to believe when you're drafting Brandon Aiyuk that Trey Lance ends up being good, or that Jimmy Garoppolo is just average like normal, your average Jimmy, and you're just happy with Brandon Aiyuk. I think he's a relatively safe pick with a decent amount of upside, given the 49ers offense may look so much better with Trey Lance under center. At number 27, we have the guy that is below me right now. Pause. Mr. Chase Edmonds, wide receiver of the Mr. Chase Claypool, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers, underdog ADP 67.7. Now, just like with Deontay Johnson, there is so much confusion with which wide receiver to be drafting in Pittsburgh. Some people, I can tell you, are still on the Juju Smith-Schuster train, and I have never been more off of a train than the Juju Smith-Schuster train, because frankly, I think it's been derailed and is heading directly into the fucking iceberg that the Titanic went into, because his Corvette cannot be stopped, and he is just going to continue to be mediocre. I genuinely believe if Juju Smith-Schuster was on the Chiefs or went to a different team, he would be very good, but that is not what he ended up doing. He went back with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that the time is for Chase Claypool. Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, again, 6'4", 238 pounds. In his rookie campaign, in 16 games, Chase Claypool finished as the wide receiver 22 in PPR, 19.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 14 in standard, averaging 13.4 PPR points per game, 11.5 half PPR points per game, and 9.6 standard points per game. Reverse that, you get 6.9. Very nice. From a points per game perspective, Chase Claypool is wide receiver 34 in PPR, 29.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 21 in standard. It should be very easy to see a leap from these numbers in his sophomore season. Last year, he had a grand total of 62 receptions on 109 targets for 859 receiving yards, as well as 11 total touchdowns on the season. He was 9th highest in air yards at the wide receiver position with 1,448, because he is a nice deep down the field target that Big Ben can rely on. Now, you obviously, when drafting Chase Claypool, have to be all in on the narrative that Big Ben will stay healthy. Because if Big Ben goes down, this ship goes down with him, because the backups behind Big Ben are fucking bad. They are bad. So you have to assume that Big Ben is able to stay healthy for Chase Claypool to end up providing a lot of value in 2021. I think that this guy is going to be scoring a lot of touchdowns in 2021, just like he did last year, scoring 11 total touchdowns, 5th highest at the wide receiver position. I think that this offense likes to use Chase Claypool. Mike Tomlin likes to use Chase Claypool. So ranking him anywhere outside of the top 30 to me would be a little bit crazy. At numero 28, we have Robbie Anderson, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers, 71.0 ADP. A couple of days ago, it came out that Robbie Anderson sees a new spark in Sam Darnold. You wanna know what the new spark is? The fact that Adam Gase doesn't have this guy chained in his fucking basement anymore, and Sam Darnold can actually try to play football correctly. Sam Darnold, I have never seen a quarterback, at least recently, be more screwed by a head coach than Sam Darnold was by Adam Gase. Adam Gase did not help him at all. Now, could Sam Darnold be complete and utter dog shit Yes, it could turn out that that pick was a waste by the Jets, which already kind of is the truth because they traded him, but the fact that he was just actually bad. The change of scenery does nothing for him, and he sucks. But I don't really see that happening, and I think Robbie Anderson should be relatively decent again. Robbie Anderson is definitely one of those players, though, that you need to understand the difference between the finish on the season versus the points per game finish. In 16 games, Robbie Anderson finished as wide receiver 19 in PPR, 23.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 27 in standard, averaging 14 PPR points per game, 11.5 PPR points per game, and 8.1 standard points per game, making him finish as wide receiver 29 in PPR, 33.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 36 in standard points per game. So Robbie Anderson as a whole last year was solid, but on a week-to-week basis, he was relatively inconsistent. Now, this is with worse quarterback play, in my opinion, to what he should see with Sam Darnold, and if it's not worse, it's probably going to end up being linear, right? If that's the word to use, I'm not a math guy. Just a similar movement, right? You go from Bridgewater to Sam Darnold. Either Sam Darnold is going to be much better than Bridgewater, because I don't have the same kind of speak on Teddy Bridgewater that a lot of people have. A lot of people believe Bridgewater's pretty good. I don't believe that. I'm not a Teddy Two-Glove stan. I think he's all right. But I think that Sam Darnold will do better. For Robbie Anderson, they obviously have that previous connection from the New York Jumbo Jets. So with Robbie Anderson, I see the upside of him in Carolina. I just worry again. About the fact that he's not super consistent. That is really what it's going to be with Robbie Anderson. Last year, 138 targets. He had 95 receptions. He had 3 tugs. He had 1,088 receiving yards. So clearly, he does get a lot of volume thrown his way. So if he continues to get that volume, he should be solid. But I am definitely scared to rank him higher than 28 based upon right now. At number 29, we have Titty Boy T Higgins, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. Underdog ADP 56.8. He is going ahead of a lot of the guys we just talked about. In 16 games last year, in T Higgins' rookie season, he put up wide receiver 28 numbers in PPR, 30.5 PPR, and number 28 in standard, averaging 12.2 PPR points per game, 10.1 half PPR points per game, and 8.1 standard points per game, meaning on a points per game basis, he was wide receiver 40 in PPR, 39 half PPR, and wide receiver number 37 in standard. So T Higgins definitely had a great season, despite the fact that his quarterback ended up tearing his ACL. Now, obviously, there are some big additions to this team, being the fact that they ended up adding Joe Burrow's collegiate teammate, wide receiver 1 at LSU, Ja'Marr Chase. So that hurts T Higgins definitely. If they didn't draft Ja'Marr Chase and they ended up electing to draft Penei Sewell, then you would have been much happier, in my opinion, drafting T Higgins. He probably would have been a top 20 wide receiver in my rankings, but he gets barrel stuffed by the fact that they end up drafting Ja'Marr Chase. T Higgins' numbers last year were amazing. 107 targets, ranking 28th at wide receiver, 67 receptions, 29th at wide receiver, 6 total touchdowns, and 908 receiving yards. They were amazing because I did not expect that much at all, and he certainly had a breakout season, at least in my book. So with T Higgins, again, I see a lot of upside in this offense being amazing. The fact that their defense probably sucks complete and utter cock again definitely boosts up T Higgins' value, because the offense will have to pass the ball later in games. But with Ja'Marr Chase there, I am going to pump the brakes. Not to a full stop, not to a complete and utter panic, but I'm pumping the brakes. I'm nervous, and I think you should be too. There is a world that we may live in where Ja'Marr Chase is the highest finisher at the wide receiver position. There's a world where Tyler Boyd, being the slot guy, doesn't lose as many targets. And then he actually is the number 1 guy on this team for fantasy football. So there's a lot of scenarios that we can break down. I think all 3 of these guys could be good. So again, don't run away from T Higgins. Just understand when you're drafting him that I don't have him ranked as high due to the things going against T Higgins. So again, I like T Higgins, just not completely sold in on him, even though I believe he is a very good player. We're about 20-ish minutes into this video, so if you have ended up enjoying thus far, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. At number 30, we have a guy that I feel like fails every single year. Wide receiver, Odell Beckham Jr., wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns, underdog ADP 63.8. That's just too high for my liking. He is a guy that every single year will be talked up because he reached back like 1-3, made that crazy-ass catch. How long ago now? 6, 7 years ago now, right? Hasn't been productive since then. Hasn't been productive in a Cleveland Browns uniform. Odell Beckham Jr. is like the meme. You're not that guy, pal. Trust me, you're not that guy. If you know what the meme is that I'm talking about, he's not the guy. He's not the guy. The Cleveland Browns are a more run-heavy team than they were in the past without Kevin Stefanski. This completely limits Odell Beckham Jr.'s upside. The fact that he also has looked like shit recently also limits his upside. He's a guy that is ranked in the top 30 because if he fell far enough, I would take him. Because I know that the old Odell Beckham Jr. is still deep inside of this guy. It is. He still very well could be the 23-year-old Odell Beckham Jr. this year. But everything is going against him. It really is. I'd rather draft Jarvis at the discount because Jarvis Landry is safe. Odell is about as safe as fucking a hooker with a broken condom, okay? That's about as safe as it gets. That's about as unsafe as it gets, I should say, okay? Now, again, I'm not an Odell Beckham Jr. hater. At points in my life, I honestly thought Odell Beckham Jr. was going to be a Hall of Famer. I honestly thought Odell Beckham Jr. was a great wide receiver, but he is just not that man anymore. He's just not that guy. You're not that guy, pal. Trust me, you're not that guy. 44 receptions last year in 7 games. He had 23 receptions. He had 319 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. He finished as wide receiver 89 in PPR, 85 in half PPR, 75 in standard. From a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 39 in PPR, 35 in half PPR, tied with Kupp and Sterling Shepard. Wide receiver number 25 in standard, tied with Terry McLaurin, averaging 12.4 PPR points per game, 10.8 half PPR points per game, as well as 9.1 standard points per game. And honestly, his finish is so high due to the fact that he actually scored 4 touchdowns in 7 games. I think that Odell Beckham Jr., again, still has the talent deep inside of him to be able to do something. To be the old Odell Beckham Jr. But right now, I do not see a way in Cleveland that this happens in a year. In 2 years, if he's traded to a team that is going to be throwing the ball more, then yes, Odell could be the guy. But in this offense, he's just not. He is just not. And I know there are going to be people that call me an idiot for not liking Odell Beckham Jr. And I know he's the guy I've talked about most in this video because I feel so passionate about Odell Beckham Jr. I feel so passionate about the fact that I will tell you not to draft him, and every single year, people still end up drafting him. Happens every year. That's why I harp on him so heavily this season. That's why I'm going to. Because last year, I don't think I did it enough. Because I saw a lot of rosters and people were drafting Odell Beckham Jr., people that watch my videos. So I don't want that to happen again. Again, you can draft him if you want. Again, I'm not making your decisions, right? You're your own guy or gal. I respect you. Okay? You can make your own decision. You can draft Odell Beckham Jr. But just remember that I'm not the guy who told you to do it if you end up doing it. So just remember that. Shout out to Odell. I hope he returns to form because he's honestly one of the most electrifying wide receivers to watch in the NFL. But recently, he's like a erectile dysfunction without Viagra. He just frankly cannot get it up. Next wide receiver, Wiki, DJ Chark, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Current underdog ADP 68.9.1. Off of being very nice. I like DJ Chark, okay? So, DJ Chark finished in 13 games as wide receiver, 48 in PPR, 48 in half PPR, and 48 in standard, averaging 11.8 PPR points per game, 9.8 half PPR points per game, and 7.7 standard points per game, meaning from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 43 in PPR, 42 in half PPR, and 41 in standard. So, last year, Urban Meyer actually went out and said this, that DJ Chark's a big guy who played small last year. And I agree. But what was he supposed to do? Right? What was he supposed to do? They took his quarterback and took him behind the barn and decapitated him, basically. Gardner Minshew was more than healthy to play a majority of the season. The guy barely graced the gridiron. Why is that? Because the Jaguars wanted touchdown Jesus, Trevor Lawrence. That's why. So, that's what happened. DJ Chark went from a really high upside pick because Gardner should be good to his quarterback has been taken from him. So, what do we think this year? This wide receiver room is crowded. It's crowded. DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, Marvin Jones, and they draft Travis Etienne. Kind of worrisome for DJ Chark, but I ultimately think he's the best wide receiver out of that group. Again, last year his numbers were still okay. 94 targets, 53 receptions, 706 receiving yards, 5 total touchdowns. Nowhere near what you drafted him for, though. I thought he had top 15 wide receiver potential. No, he just was not that. But I think that he could be. I think DJ Chark is going to go up and down in my rankings depending on what we see in preseason. If he is Trevor Lawrence's guy, then he does have top 15 potential again. But if it's going to be an orgy at the wide receiver position, 1 week it's Jones, 1 week it's Chark, 1 week it's Laviska, 1 week Etienne goes out there and plays wide receiver, 1 week Tebow's the guy, then you're fucked. Then you're fucked. That's why he's ranked at 31, because this Jaguars situation as a whole is confusing. It's very confusing. The upside's there, but it is definitely confusing. Final wide receiver to be talking about is Brandon cooking it up in the kitchen. Brandon Cooks, underdog ADP 91.0 out of the Houston Texans. No one, no one, is talking about Brandon Cooks. Why is no one talking about Brandon Cooks? He's the wide receiver 1 on a team. And not like how DJ Chark's the wide receiver 1. We know Brandon Cooks the wide receiver 1. Name another Houston wide receiver for me. Exactly. And if you named one, congratulations. Because it's hard. Because there's no one there. But Nick, I don't know if Deshaun Watson's going to play. I know. If Deshaun Watson plays, Cook's upside probably could be a top 15 receiver. Because last year, he was a wide receiver 17 in PPR, 15 half PPR, and 16 in standard, playing in 15 games. From a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 16 in PPR, tied with Mike Evans, 18 half PPR, 17 in standard, tied with Al Robinson, averaging 15.5 PPR points per game, 12.8 half PPR points per game, and 10.1 standard points per game. Brandon Cooks went under the rug. He's going under the carpet. No one is talking about Brandon Cooks. No one. And I understand why. Because of the Deshaun Watson situation. But even before that, when we were looking at early rankings for wide receivers, no one was uttering the name Brandon Cooks. And it's for a bad reason. Brandon Cooks is still good. But Nick, Brandon Cooks is injury prone. No, he's not. He's barely ever injured. It's just when he gets hurt, it's all over TV because the guy gets fucking murdered. O.J. Simpson style, okay? So I think Brandon Cooks is still good. The question is, who is going to be the quarterback? Will it be Watson? Will it be Tyrod Taylor? Or will it be Davis Mills? Either way, you got to take the shot on a number 1 wide receiver on the team this late in the draft at pick 91.0. You just have to. Last year, having 119 targets, 81 receptions, 6 total touchdowns, 1,143 receiving yards, 10th highest on the receiving yards list in the NFL, and no one gives a rat's ass about Brandon Cooks. So again, try to put away the quarterback thoughts. Take them out of your head, even though that's hard to do. Just take it away and draft Brandon Cooks. That's all I've got for you guys today. That was a quick breakdown. Not really quick. It was like 30 minutes. But it was a nice video, I think. I enjoyed recording this. I hope you guys enjoyed as well. If you didn't like it, let me know as well. That's okay. My videos aren't for everyone, and not every video is going to be amazing. But in my heart of hearts, I like this one. I thought I had a fun time. So thank you guys for watching. I love each and every single one of you guys. We hit 2 million views. Very nice. Thank you guys very much. I don't think we actually hit it. I think we're at like 1.99999. So that's a tough scene. But I'll talk about it in tomorrow's video. Thank you guys for everything again. I love you. Stay safe. Goodbye.